Part 44. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 431. Although they belong to the same camp, after all, the 5 fingers are not the same length. Here in the Allied forces, the combat effectiveness of each unit in each base cannot be generalized, and they are very different from each other. Those who were able to rush to the decisive battlefield first and have fought in a stalemate with the coalition forces for so long were naturally among the most powerful bases. In addition, the Allied forces still have many weak bases, some of which are still in stalemate with the coalition bases in other battlefields even now, and some did not enter this decisive battlefield due to lack of strength, but followed orders and stationed in addition to the decisive battlefield. It was developed on the spot and existed as a base for reserve strength and soldier supply. The one that was attacked by the Seoul Empire this time was such a supply base. It was some distance away from the decisive battlefield and the Allied general headquarters, and was almost at the outermost edge of the Allied forces' sphere of influence. General Bob turned on the electronic video, which immediately showed the specific battle situation. It can be seen from the electronic video that there is now a strange army that has broken through the defensive force at the entrance of the supply base and is wreaking havoc inside the base. This strange team is mainly composed of soldiers wearing psychic helmets. They concentrate on exerting their spiritual power and condense it into solid flames, which are extremely destructive. From the previous reports of intelligence personnel, General Bob learned about the existence of this type of military unit. It was the main combat unit of the Seoul Empire, the Yuri recruits. Under the bombardment of this large number of Yuri's new recruits, a defensive building would burst out from time to time in the supply base. Even the soldiers guarding there would always be covered in fire, and the sound of explosions would be heard from tanks from time to time. In addition to these Yuri recruits, there are also more than a dozen very ferocious soldiers in this army. These soldiers are nearly twice as tall as ordinary soldiers. Their bodies are blue-black and their muscles are exaggerated. Each one is huge, like a monster. This monster-like soldier does not carry any weapons because he is very powerful. His fists as big as clay pots are his best weapons. Some Allied soldiers wanted to focus fire on these monster soldiers, but they were counterattacked. Several monster soldiers rushed to the front with the spray of those fire snakes. With just 2 punches, an Allied soldier was killed alive. Explode. There are also Grizzly tanks trying to stop these monster soldiers, but the damage of unleveled Grizzly tanks to infantry is limited, let alone these monster-like soldiers. As a result, instead of being able to kill these soldiers, they were besieged by them and blasted them to pieces with their fists. This kind of soldier is simply more terrifying than Wang Ling in terms of physical destructive power. When Wang Ling got angry, he used his body to resist the Allied tanks. Although his physical strength alone could shake the tank, it could only shake it, but it could not explode it, unless it could be done with the help of military attack methods. But now this monster-like soldier can really blow up a tank with just his fists. Of course, not only soldiers and tanks, but also buildings were the targets of their attack. A dozen monster-like soldiers cleared away the blocking Allied troops nearby, and then began to attack the buildings. Several monsters worked together to surround a machine gun bunker, swung their huge fists and smashed it, finally exploding it at the cost of killing one monster. Some other monster soldiers smashed a section of the wall with their fists, and collectively used their fists to demolish the towering combat laboratory. The sight of this ferocious monster soldier made the people in this supply base feel terrified and frightened. However, this is not the full power of the Seoul Empire. While the troops at the front are fighting, there are 2 enchanting female soldiers behind the Seoul Empire troops, holding slender sniper rifles and specializing in sneak attacks on the Allied soldiers. Any Allied soldier hit by it will be killed in an instant. Moreover, this is not a normal death. The body of a soldier killed by the sniper rifle will expand exaggeratedly by twice, and then explode, and a cloud of green smoke that moves slowly in the wind will float out of his body. This green smoke is highly poisonous and spreads around other allied infantry. When those infantry breathe in the green smoke, the health bar on their heads will shrink accordingly. If they are poisoned by this green smoke, their bodies will also expand twice. It exploded twice, releasing the same poisonous smoke. Simply because the poisonous smoke spreads very slowly, and the number of such female snipers is not too large, it will not have much impact in a short period of time. Otherwise, if there are more female snipers, more soldiers will be blown up in the base, and the poisonous smoke will permeate the entire base. It will be an infantry cemetery, and all the infantry will not be able to survive. Da-da-da. Da-da-da. Of course, this allied base is also constantly counter-attacking. In addition to the regular troops, there are even 2 SEALs coming from behind the base. This SEAL force is also the natural enemy of the infantry. Almost no infantryman can block a round of fire from the SEAL force. As a result, the 2 SEALs rushed in and immediately dealt a heavy blow to these Soul Empire troops. In an instant, more than 10 Yuri recruits at the front were shot and killed, and then half of the monster soldiers were shot to death. One of the SEALs was directly promoted to a 1-star veteran. However, the disaster came just then. The wantonness of these 2 SEALs also attracted the attention of several members of the Psychic Empire team. As a result, 2 spiritual power lines were projected down, and the 2 SEALs who were originally killing people was directly controlled by the mind, rebelled in an instant, and became a minion of the Mind Empire. He turned his head and shot at the infantry in the Allied base. In a few breaths, he wiped out the surrounding infantry. Net. Faced with such threats, the defensive buildings in the base no longer cared about old feelings, and a machine gun bunker immediately opened fire. However, it would take some time for the machine gun bunker to kill the SEALs. Taking advantage of this time, the 2 SEALs rushed forward under strafing fire, came to the machine gun bunker, and installed bombs. In the end, 1 SEAL died. At the cost, the machine gun bunker was successfully blown up. However, the surviving SEAL also came within the fire range of a light prism tower. The light prism tower gathered energy and emitted light prism rays, killing the SEAL in an instant. After losing the target of control, the members of the Psychic Army didn't care. Instead, they looked for another target to control, making the scene even more chaotic. From time to time, Allied troops were controlled and directly rebelled. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 432. Chaos. Chaos. This scene is a mess. As a supply base for the Allied forces, the overall combat effectiveness of this base is not as good as those powerful bases on the front line, but it does have a lot of soldiers and tanks. However, the troops of the Psychic Empire are also menacing. In addition to the Yuri recruits who rely on powerful firepower to fight, there are also soldiers who are as ferocious as beasts, and even snipers carrying virus bullets, and there are also psychic troops mixed in. Under the strong attack of the troops, this supply base felt caught off guard, and the number of casualties was huge. Hiss. Observing this battle from the electronic video, General Bob couldn't help but gasped, "Are these the troops of the Soul Empire? The firepower is really strong." Some other generals also followed and watched the electronic video, and their expressions changed. "Yeah, it's a bit scary. How come those soldiers who look like monsters and beasts are so strong? They can actually blow up tanks with their bare hands. And the sniper is also very difficult. Just kill her, she actually has a virus. Even soldiers poisoned by those green smoke will burst out with poisonous gas. This is simply fan tao of chemical weapons, very it's humane. The purpose of his spiritual empire is to destroy us and the coalition forces. Who cares about your humanity and inhumanity? And don't the coalition forces also have so many chemical weapons? That's all we care about. So this game has its own characteristics suspected of undermining a certain force. It would be fine if it was just the sniper, but the threat from the psychic troops is actually so great. Many of our elite-level soldier tanks were directly controlled by him, and they came back to hit our own people. Yes, this is the scariest part. If there are a large number of psychic troops relying on this kind of ability, how can we fight this battle? I used to underestimate these psychic troops and thought they would be like this, but now it seems that at the beginning, that's simply not working hard when helping the coalition forces. This psychic army is simply a nightmare. Looking at the Leopard, it can be seen that the war situation in the supply base has not reached an uncontrollable level, but seeing the capabilities of these arms of the Soul Empire, many generals in the Allied General Headquarters are already a little afraid. Quiet. As a 5-star general and commander, General Bob was very annoyed by the attitude of these generals. He punched the control panel with a bang and cursed, "If you grow up with other people's ambitions, you will destroy your own prestige. This is what you are doing. Is this what we should do?" The Soul Empire is indeed tricky, but they are not gods and can always be eliminated. Send me an order to have the supply base in the nearby area quickly send troops for reinforcements, and we must eliminate all these Soul Empire troops. Yes, a communications soldier immediately took the order and quickly conveyed the message. The other generals also quickly shut up and focused on watching the electronic video. It seemed that General Bob's irritation really had an effect. In the supply base, there had been continuous firefights for so long. In the next short period of time, many Allied soldiers and Grizzly tanks were promoted to 3 stars. The elites, with their firepower instantly increased, began to change their momentum and violently counterattack the Yuri troops of the Mind Empire. Not only that, the 2 Phantom tanks that were originally disguised and hidden in the rear of the base also took action. They hid aside and fired cold shots. Almost every time a shot was fired, a member of Yuri's troops caught fire and died. Of course, those monster-like soldiers are too resistant to beatings and need 2 or 3 more shots. In addition, this supply base even temporarily produced a light prism tank. After leaving the tank factory, it had no time to show off. It quickly joined the battlefield, hid behind 2 light prism towers, and fired light prisms from a distance. Raise. Under such counterattack, Yuri's troops suffered heavy losses. However, despite this, these Yuri troops still have the ability to continue fighting. What really played a decisive role was the dozen or so rocket pilots who flew in later. These Yuri troops are very powerful and have various attack methods. They can catch people off guard when they attack, but they have no air defense capabilities. Even the psychic troops cannot control air targets. Choo choo choo. Choo choo choo. Taking advantage of this opportunity, these dozen rocket pilots opened fire quickly and quickly harvested the heads of these Yuri troops from the air. The Yuri troops, who were still able to maintain a stalemate with the Allied base, were quickly defeated, and a large number of soldiers died in the battle. The supply base, which was originally overwhelmed, became excited and relieved when they saw this scene. With this momentum, it won't be a problem to repel Yuri's troops or even wipe them out. However, just when the supply base was excited and increased its firepower, wiping out about 70% of Yuri's troops, an accident suddenly occurred. Reinforcements from Yuri's troops arrived. The first thing that broke into this area were 4 strange-looking tanks. They were small and looked like small armored vehicles. Their characteristic was that there were 2 large-caliber Gatling guns mounted on top of the tanks. They looked very dangerous. These 4 strange tanks had a very clear target. After appearing on the scene, they rushed straight to the Allied supply base. After arriving at the intersection, they directly aimed their crosshairs at the rocket pilots in the sky. The 2 Gatling guns slowly rotated. Large-caliber bullets were poured into the air. This kind of tank turned out to be an anti-aircraft tank in Yuri's army, similar to the Coalition's anti-aircraft tracked vehicle and the Coalition's multi-purpose infantry vehicle. Under attack, the dozen rocket pilots in the air decisively abandoned Yuri's infantry and began to focus fire on the 4 anti-aircraft tanks. However, this kind of anti-aircraft tank weapon can cause considerable damage to infantry. More than a dozen rocket pilots focused their fire, but failed to kill even one anti-aircraft tank, and they were swept away one after another. After killing these obstructive rocket pilots, the 4 anti-aircraft tanks turned to a nearby power plant and opened fire. What's more interesting is that this tank has a unique attack method. At the beginning, the rotation speed of the 2 Gatling guns was slow, but after firing continuously for a period of time, the speed suddenly accelerated by a notch. If you continue to fire for a while, the speed will increase like crazy. Originally, the damage speed of the power plant was not obvious due to the attack of these 4 anti-aircraft tanks. However, these anti-aircraft tanks accelerated their firing rate twice in succession. In the end, they opened fire like crazy. The power plant could no longer withstand this kind of bombardment, and the strips fell down, and they exploded within a short time. As the power plant exploded, 10 more Yuri tanks carrying large-caliber gun barrels broke into the supply base, joining the battle and focusing their fire to counterattack. There is nothing unusual about this type of tank, and the shells it fires are normal. It is no different from the Rhino tank and the Grizzly tank. It is probably the main battle tank of Yuri's army. After joining the battlefield, it can barely hold on. The balance of this battle. However, Yuri's troops have more than just new tanks. After this main battle tank, 2 more strange-looking vehicles came in. This kind of tank looks like a racing car, but it carries something similar to a diffuser in the center. After breaking into the Allied base, this strange vehicle rushed all the way without stopping, braving the bombardment of 2 light prism towers and came to the side of the light prism tank. After stopping, it released a circle of red gas. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 433. Many of the types of troops in Yuri's army have never been seen before by the Allies. They are like new concept weapons and unimaginable attack methods. For example, the 2 strange vehicles currently seem to have no attack power. They are not equipped with any weapons and only have a diffuser in the center. As a result, on the way in, many of the defending Allied troops did not know about it and did not take the time to target it. They just concentrated their firepower on Yuri's main battle tanks and remaining infantry. However, when these 2 strange vehicles braved the bombardment of the light prism tower and came to the light prism tank and released red gas, all the guards regretted it. This red gas is like a very strong mental toxin. After covering the light prism tank, the light prism tank immediately went crazy. Swish. 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 Its whole body was covered with red toxins. It seemed that its nerves were confused and it couldn't distinguish between ourselves and the enemy, so it launched an indiscriminate attack on everything around it. During the previous bombardment of Yuri's troops, this light tank killed a large number of infantry, gained experience, and was promoted to the 1-star veteran level, and its firing frequency was accelerated. Unexpectedly, this mental toxin also strengthened its attack, nearly doubling its shooting frequency. The first to suffer was the 5 multifunctional infantry vehicles that were counter-attacking in the distance. They exploded one after another under the continuous bombardment of the light beams. Then, the light prism rays bombarded the infantry group again, shooting several times in succession, killing nearly 20 Allied soldiers. Then, the light prism tank continued to turn its target, rays of light prisms shot down, and a machine gun bunker exploded. Naturally, during this process, the 2 light prism towers were also fighting back at all times, and the 2 Yuri weird vehicles that caused the light prism tanks to go insane were bombarded one after another. However, the neurotoxin has invaded the light prism tank, causing it to continue to suffer from mental confusion. Even if the culprit is eliminated, the light prism tank has not returned to normal. It is still firing, and the next target will be changed. These two light prism towers were formed. Several light prisms were rayed in succession, and the two light prism towers were also exploded one after another. After destroying the light prism tower, this light prism tank is still not satisfied and continues to move its targets. All troops within its bombardment range, whether it is its own base or Yuri's troops, are all targets of its attack. It is simply the indiscriminate attack caused widespread damage to the Allied base in a short period of time. This insanity is completely different from the mind control of the psychic troops. In essence, the light tank has not changed its position, but is not controlled by anyone. It regards all targets it sees as enemies, so that its own base is clearly under its control. He was harmed, but he couldn't fight back at all. Swish. After bombarding for a long time, destroying many troops and buildings in the base, and with the last ray of light falling, and severely damaging the tank factory, the red neurotoxins densely covered on his body finally disappeared. It's dissipated. It turns out that this toxin is not permanent and will become ineffective after a period of time without the source of the toxin. However, during this period of time, this light tank had thrown the entire base into chaos. It could have been able to compete with Yuri's troops, but now it was suddenly at a disadvantage. As if he knew what stupid thing he had done, the light prism tank seemed to be in a daze after returning to normal. It shook the light prism ray emission port left and right, looking innocent. After being stunned for a while, the light tank simply moved its position in a hurry and began to make up for it, bombarding Yuri's troops, trying to reverse the situation of the battle again. Buzz buzz. But, it's too late. After this wave of destruction, a new type of troops appeared in Yuri's army. Outside the base, 5 flying saucers actually flew in. That's right, it's a flying saucer. Yuri's Air Force is actually a flying saucer that was once mistaken for an alien aircraft. Swish. Swish swish. As Yuri's Air Force, the destructive power of this flying saucer is also not weak. While flying into the sky above the Allied base, it is also attacking downwards. This attack method is also quite special. It rotates the fuselage of the flying saucer, accumulates at the edge of the flying saucer, and emits a weapon similar to a light. The attack power of this weapon is also very impressive. It can kill an infantryman in 3 or 2 hits. Even the Allied tanks can't withstand a few rounds and will be blown up. 5 flying saucers flew in at the same time, firing continuously along the way. Light, Allied troops were being bombarded to death at all times. Seeing this special air force, the Allied base was also a little panicked and hurriedly sent out multifunctional infantry vehicles to counterattack. However, quite a number of these multifunctional infantry vehicles had been destroyed in battles before, and several were destroyed by insane light tanks. The number that could be mobilized at one time was extremely small, and only 3 of them could come and fight back. However, these 3 multifunctional infantry vehicles were no match for the flying saucer. They were fired upon by the 5 flying saucers, and within a few rounds they were all destroyed. Swish. Swish. In addition to the multifunctional infantry vehicle, an anti-aircraft missile outside the base also opened fire and hit a flying saucer. However, the flying saucer did not emit light to counterattack. Instead, it braved the missile bombardment and flew directly above the anti-aircraft missile. Then the base commander was shocked. I saw that the flying saucer seemed to be absorbing and controlling the anti-aircraft missile through the air. Circles of yellow light continued to rise upward from above the anti-aircraft missile and submerged into the fuselage of the flying saucer. At the same time, this anti-aircraft missile seemed to be completely scrapped. It could no longer fire a missile, and it had become a decoration. While controlling the anti-aircraft missile, the flying saucer was also restless. Within its attack range, all Allied troops and buildings were targets of its attack. It continuously launched light attacks, hitting several Allied soldiers one after another. Several Grizzly tanks were shot and killed, and even the only light Prism tank was blown up. Even the 2 Phantom tanks within this range accidentally showed their flaws during the attack, and were targeted and started a series of attacks. While this flying saucer was showing its power, several other flying saucers were also idle. 2 of them each controlled the 2 outer light prism towers, and one flew directly to the depths of the Allied base and began to absorb ore refining. The factory seems to be forcibly stealing combat funds. The most deadly thing was that the last flying saucer actually chose a power plant and flew over it. When it came to the sky above it, it immediately began to absorb. With circles of yellow light rising up, the entire Allied supply base was instant power outage. Once a base is established, how serious are the consequences of a power outage? You can see this by looking at how Wang Ling likes to knock out the power plant of the Allied base in advance every time he attacks. This has an almost fatal impact. Of course, the biggest headache was the general headquarters. The supply base lost power and the spy satellites also lost their supply. The electronic videos and electronic maps in the general headquarters that were originally aimed at that area were also cut off in an instant and became pitch black. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 434. Quiet. 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 The supply base lost power, the spy satellite lost power, and the display of the general headquarters also lost the image of the supply base. Looking at the dark scene, all the senior generals and staff in the Allied General Command Post, including General Bob and Agent Tanya, all fell silent. There was no sound for a long time. Smell, the silence is a bit depressing and a bit scary. Boom. Asshole. After a long time, General Bob finally got angry. He punched the control panel and cursed wildly, "What a spiritual empire! What a Yuri! I didn't expect it to become a climate wow. These types of weapons are simply unheard of, unseen, and impossible to guard against." Many senior generals glanced at each other, their faces a little bitter and ugly. However, having been reprimanded by General Bob before, none of them dared to answer anything. However, Agent Tanya ignored General Bob's anger and said, "General, there are some words you may not like to hear. Say it directly. You did underestimate Yuri before. Although this battle was just a raid on our supply base and not our main combat force, it is obvious that Yuri's troops did not show their true strength. At least, according to the intelligence, psychic storm has never appeared. We are very unfamiliar with Yuri, but Yuri is very familiar with us, and looking at this battle, the combat effectiveness and technological power of the psychic empire itself are not weaker than ours. If, this kind of under such circumstances, if our allies and the empire of mind start a decisive battle." When Agent Tanya said this, she seemed to be afraid that General Bob would be angry. She did not dare to continue talking, but looked at General Bob. Although General Bob was angry, he kept listening to these words and waved his hand. "If you continue, what will happen if we have a decisive battle with the Mind Empire?" Agent Tanya nodded, pretending to be courageous, and said bluntly, "The possibility of us losing the decisive battle is very, very high. The threat the Mind Empire poses to us is even greater than that of the coalition forces, and it is much greater." Snored. Sure enough, when General Bob heard this, he immediately became angry and turned back to glare at Agent Tanya. However, he didn't reprimand him for anything. He just snorted coldly and continued to look at the darkened monitor, obviously acquiescing to this statement. However, after a dull period of time, General Bob asked again, "We have little chance of winning, so if the coalition forces fight a decisive battle with the Mind Empire, what will be the outcome?" Agent Tanya, like a specialized combat consultant, replied, "General, I don't know what the defensive strength of the Mind Empire is, After all, I haven't seen it. But based on the current offensive form they have shown, the coalition will win. The possibility is probably not that high, and it may even be worse than us. Oh, General Bob, who was originally annoyed, seemed to feel a little proud when he heard that the coalition forces were not as good as them. Taking advantage of this glimmer of pride, not far away, a four-star general finally intervened and analyzed. General, we are more technologically advanced than the coalition forces, but the coalition forces have more firepower than us. It seems that we can't fight against the empire of mind alone. It's very difficult. But what if? What he means later is actually very obvious. If both parties join forces, the chance of winning will be greatly increased. That's enough. Don't say any more. However, General Bob interrupted him directly. Although it is said that the Allied forces are united, this is only a very obscure voice within the Allied forces, and it is even just a simple statement, but General Bob is very resistant to cooperation with this old rival. After interrupting the others, General Bob rubbed his temples and took a few breaths. After calming down, he asked, "How is the supply base doing now? When will reinforcements from the nearest base arrive?" The supply base was restrained by the Sol Empire's flying saucer and completely paralyzed. Even the Allied forces headquarters had lost contact with it and naturally had no idea about the situation of the war. A staff member immediately replied, "General, it will take nearly an hour at the fastest. And this is the fastest rocket launcher and multi-purpose infantry vehicle. If you wait for infantry and other tanks, it will take even longer." So long? I hope the supply base can hold on. There was no way, the Sol Empire's raid was too tricky, the supply base at that location was too far away from the general headquarters, and it was too late for rescue. General Bob was also in a hurry, and had no choice, but now he could only wait for news. The waiting time was very excruciating. After General Bob and other senior generals waited for several hours, a message finally came from the communications unit, "Report to the general, there is news from the supply base." "How about it?" Reporting to the general, after our reinforcements arrived there, the war was over. All the supply bases were wiped out. There were traces of explosions everywhere, and there was no trace of the Sol Empire's troops. What? Although he had clearly guessed the outcome, General Bob still felt a little dizzy after hearing it with his own ears, and his feet were a little unsteady. Fortunately, Agent Tanya acted quickly and helped him in time. "Are you really unable to resist? Are Yuri's troops that strong? How can we fight like this? We're completely confused, and we can't even figure out the enemy's attack method." Not only General Bob, but also other senior generals could not hold back and started talking about it. After General Bob stabilized, he let out a long sigh and did not reprimand the other generals. After dismissing the communication troops with a wave of his hand, he said with a very ugly face, "Okay, don't talk about it. This battle, if we lose, we lose. We have more than one base, and we can afford to lose. What's more, I don't think it's because our allies are not good, but because we don't understand the Sol Empire troops at all, and they don't know the attack methods of their various arms. We suffer a loss. It's also normal. Yes, Yuri's troops are coming fiercely, and we are very unfamiliar with them. We will suffer a lot in this battle." That's right, the main reason is that we don't understand Yuri's troops and we suffer a big loss. This loss cannot be in vain. At least the troops seen in the electronic video must be recorded. This is precious information that our subordinates sacrificed their lives for. General Bob's words immediately received responses from the generals, who all expressed their agreement. Having been able to fight the war for hegemony with the Allied forces to this point, the Allied forces are naturally not just for nothing. They gain wisdom through every experience. After observing those arms, they immediately began to record and study them. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 435. In this battle, for various reasons, the Allies suffered a huge loss. They failed to figure out these Yuri troops, and the entire supply base was completely wiped out. Although it is true that a considerable part of the reason is that the Allies do not understand Yuri's troops, this is still a shame for the Allies. When analyzing and recording these emerging units, whether it is General Bob or others present, the senior generals have all decided to block the news, at least not to let the coalition forces know. However, there is no airtight wall in this world. Even though these Allied generals repeatedly concealed the blockade, a few days later, the intelligence department of the coalition forces still obtained the information and reported it to the General Command Post. Ha ha ha, the Allies have suffered a huge loss. You deserve it. Why did you only kill the Allies and build a base? This Yuri is not good at it. In the coalition headquarters, many generals clapped their hands and applauded when they first heard the news. Just as the top brass of the Allied forces were eager to see the Allied forces suffer heavy losses and were unwilling to cooperate with the Allied forces, the top brass of the Allied forces were also very happy to see the excitement of the Allied forces. Although it has been decided that they will eventually join forces with the Allies, until the Allies take the initiative to seek cooperation, both sides are still enemies, and the Allies are happy to be beaten by the Allies. The more severely the Allies are beaten and the more serious their losses are, the more they will realize the terror of the Soul Empire, and the greater the possibility of joining forces in the future. Of course, not all high-ranking generals are gloating about the misfortune. Some people are very sensible. Leave aside this layer of hatred. The Allies have been able to maintain a stalemate with us until now, and they are not weak troops. A sneak attack by the Soul Empire actually being able to directly destroy an Allied base shows how terrifying the strength of this spiritual empire is. That's right. Fortunately, it was the Allied forces that attacked first. If this battle were to attack us, we would probably be in danger too. But the coach is wise and has gathered most of the troops together to fight the enemy together. Even if Yuri's troops come for a sneak attack, it will be difficult to cause much damage to us. We can't say too much. After all, we are all unfamiliar with the troops of the Soul Empire now, but Yuri is very familiar with us. If we really fight, we will be at a disadvantage. Every bit of understanding of the enemy needs to use the strength of our troops in exchange for our lives. What's more, not all of our bases have assembled, some have not had time to gather, and some are even still in a stalemate with some Allied bases, and it will be difficult to deal with an attack. That's really what happened. With the emergence of Yuri's disaster, some shrewd generals within the Allied forces, and even Agent Tanya, have thought of joining forces with the Allied forces. Within the coalition forces, there are naturally some shrewd generals who know the terror of the Soul Empire and have already made plans. Report. Just as the generals were discussing and expressing their opinions, an intelligence officer suddenly broke in and reported nervously, reporting to the commander, "In the early hours of this morning, our Army General Qian Tian's troops were suddenly attacked by the Soul Empire while migrating. Both sides in a fight, General Qian Tian and all his troops were sacrificed." What? Just a moment ago, we were discussing the Allied forces being attacked by Yuri and comparing what would happen if our own troops were attacked. News came immediately. Sure enough, when the coalition forces moved to a base where they encountered Yuri's troops, they could not escape the fate of destruction. Even because the base where they moved did not have many buildings, the general headquarters was delayed in receiving the news, and there was no way to watch it. War situation. When many generals heard the news, their faces darkened. This loss was even heavier than that of the Allies. The Allies at least managed to detect and record some information about Yuri's troops at the cost of the destruction of one base. However, General Qian Tian's troops died in battle, which can be said to be completely worthless, and almost no useful information was left behind. Report. Before Coach Rich and the senior generals could recover, another intelligence officer suddenly broke in and reporting to the coach, "Our army has 3 bases, General Mobi Wu, General Zhang Gan, and General Ling Xiao. The Union Army was violently attacked by the Seoul Empire troops, and the situation is critical. As the saying goes, misfortunes never come alone. We just received news that a mobile base was completely wiped out. Now there are reports of attacks. The frequency is so high that the generals present are a little uncomfortable with it." However, Coach Rich reacted quickly. He personally ordered the 3 bases to join forces and built them together temporarily. Unlike a relocated base, these 3 bases were all rebuilt in selected locations. There was a radar signal, and Coach Rich immediately opened the electronic video based on the radar signal there, showing the battle situation there. In the video, the battle between the two sides is in full swing. Similar to the previous attack on the Allied base, this group of Yuri troops still used infantry to clear the way, fighting to the death in the front, and various tanks appeared one after another in the rear. Such as Yuri recruits, monster-like soldiers, snipers carrying virus bullets, tanks with 2 Gatling guns, ordinary main battle tanks, vehicles that emit neurotoxins, and even flying saucers. In this battle, all 3 parties showed up, and the 3 coalition forces were caught off guard. A large number of soldiers were killed in the tank battle, and a large number of buildings were pushed sideways. In addition, 2 huge vehicles also appeared. They were even larger than the Apocalypse tank. Their shapes were very weird. The center looked like a brain that was enlarged dozens of times and was placed inside the cover. It looked very scary. Panic. This large vehicle also does not carry any weapons, but the brain itself is better than the weapons. Whenever this large vehicle approaches, all the infantry tanks in the base are instantly controlled by their minds and start to move towards their home. The base fires. However, when the number of soldiers and tanks under control reached a certain level, the large tank seemed to be overwhelmed. The body began to shake violently, and the health bar above its head gradually decreased. After a period of time, it exploded with a boom. The base soldiers who had been controlled before regained their normal consciousness in an instant and immediately returned to the coalition camp to block Yuri's troops. This battle was very fierce and brutal. As for the coalition forces, there is no ultra-long-range tank like the Prism tank. The V-3 rocket is too restrictive. The 3 bases are simply not produced. There is not even an air force as flexible as the rocket pilots. It can be said that they are basically useless against Yuri troops. It's not much of an advantage, and it's more difficult than the Allied forces dealing with Yuri's troops. However, after all, this is a combination of 3 coalition bases. The number of soldiers and tanks is very large. If there are too many ants, they can kill an elephant. Under the human sea tactic, waves of attacks come over, and in the end the 3 major coalition bases win. Wiped out all this group of Yuri troops. However, it was also a tragic victory. A large number of buildings in the base were damaged, and a large number of soldiers and tanks were killed. Even because of the flying saucer-like air force that forcibly controlled the power plant to cut off power. Under aerial shooting, one of the commanders accompanied the entire command headquarters to fight. Died on the battlefield. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 436. In the end, we won this battle. It is true that we won, and all Yuri's troops were wiped out, but the price was too high. Yes, almost half of the 3 bases, soldiers, tanks, and buildings were destroyed, and even one of the commanders was killed. This price is really unbearable. Excluding General Qian Tian's troops who had migrated earlier, the coalition won this round of confrontation between the coalition forces and the Seoul Empire. But as some senior generals in the General Command Post said, this price is really not small, which makes them all sigh. Later, Coach Richie saw things wisely: when there is a war, there are sacrifices. There is no way around it. At least at the expense of the losses of these troops, we also saw the combat effectiveness of Yuri's troops and learned about some of the opponent's fighting methods. Just the video record these Yuri troops in detail for me, and analyze their strengths and weaknesses and how to deal with them. Yes, Commander, a general took the order and started working immediately. Coach Rich then ordered, in addition, the location there has been exposed and is unsafe. Inform the remaining 2 bases to move again and join the base closest there to defend together. Yes. Also, record all the battles in the electronic video just now, send them to the front line, and distribute them to all commanders. By the way, I will also tell them the general situation of the battle, so that all troops can prepare a comprehensive defense and be ready to fight at any time. Prepare. Yes. Another staff member took the order and got busy. After issuing these orders one after another, the coach couldn't help but sigh while looking at the tragically defeated coalition troops in the video. The entire coalition headquarters is like a sophisticated machine, and every staff member seems to be some important parts, cooperating with each other, but busy individually. The staff member who burned the battle video was very fast. After getting the burned video, he immediately took an anti-aircraft crawler vehicle and rushed to the battlefield of the decisive battle. Distributed to all commanders, before this task was changed, it might have been a bit difficult, and it would take more than half of the time to travel. However, Yuri Cholera, these front-line bases were centered on the city defense line and concentrated in this area on a large scale. This also saved the staff's time, and the burned battle videos were quickly distributed to various locations. The commander handed it over and informed him of the current general battle situation. After all, there were only 2 team leaders in base number 15, and Wang Ling's identity was very special. After receiving the video, General Li Wiki also called Wang Ling and Chen Tong to the command post, recounted the battle situation, and watched it together. Fight video. After reading it, General Li Wiki, Xiaoping Wang, Raoiski, and Chen Tong all looked ugly. Even Chen Tong was still sighing. I've heard and asked, I've seen everything I haven't seen. Is this the army of the Seoul Empire? General Li Wiki nodded and replied, yes, this is different from the Allies. After all, we have never come into contact with Yuri's Seoul Empire before. These arms are very unfamiliar to us. In the initial exchange of fire, we are bound to suffer big losses. Zhao Pingwang also said, the attack methods of these troops are either too violent or too tricky, especially the flying saucer, which can actually fly to the power plant, control the power plant, and cut off the power supply of the entire base. It is really scary and difficult to deal with. There is also that weird big car with a brain in the middle. It seems to be able to control our troops like the psychic troops. However, the number of controls is limited. If there are too many, we will lose blood. Rovitsky also expressed his opinion. Only Wang Ling was the most indifferent, watching the video without saying a word. The other 4 people turned to look at Wang Ling. Based on Wang Ling's past performance, he knew almost every enemy army and could even see through Yuri's rebellion. So, does he still know about these Yuri soldiers now? However, in the end, they were disappointed because Wang Ling had no expression on his face and refused to say anything. They could not understand what Wang Ling meant. In fact, Wang Ling really knows about the troops of the Seoul Empire, because this version of the game happens to be installed on his computer, and he plays it for the longest time. Can he not be clear? Wang Ling can now contact Coach Rich and tell him everything he knows. In this way, the coalition forces can launch targeted deployments and reduce the number of casualties faced by Yuri's troops. However, he just didn't do that. To put it bluntly, Wang Ling also has his own considerations, and now is not the time to explain them clearly. To fight against the empire of mind, it is indeed necessary for the coalition and allied forces to join forces. This is an indisputable fact. However, with the mutual hatred between the coalition forces and the allied forces, it is impossible to unite unless they are really hurt by Yuri's beating. If the news is revealed too early, the senior generals of the allied forces will be confident. Even if the allied forces come to request alliance, they may refuse. If things go on like this, they will inevitably suffer an unprecedented loss, and may even die. That is not the result Wang Ling wants to see. What's more, as a player, Wang Ling really wants to unite the Allies and obtain the Allies' military technology. All things considered, it really cannot be revealed now. Since Wang Ling refused to say anything, General Li Wiki and the others did not feel embarrassed. After talking to each other for a few more words, they asked Wang Ling and Chen Tong to leave the command post. In the days that followed, Wang Ling basically cycled back and forth between the real world and the red alert world, working tirelessly. There have not been many changes in the red alert world during these days. Under the pressure of Yuri's mind empire, the coalition and allied forces no longer attack each other, but they all maintain a defensive posture to prevent the other party from attacking. The front line of the decisive battle, which was originally the most turbulent, is now the most peaceful. Outside the battlefield of the decisive battle, other bases are a bit miserable. Yuri's Soul Empire has also been active these days. From time to time, it will attack allied and coalition bases. However, its attack power is extremely strong, and its attack methods are also extremely tricky, very difficult to defend, and both sides suffered heavy losses. However, Wang Ling thought that it was almost time for the two sides to unite, but the top leaders of both sides refused to move. In the end, Wang Ling underestimated the hatred between the two sides. The pain was not enough to motivate the two sides to unite. There was no other way. Wang Ling sighed a few times and could only continue to wait. As for real life, although their school's winter vacation is very long, no matter how long it is, it has a deadline. After spending so long at home, it is finally the day when school starts again. On this morning, Wang Ling packed his luggage early, said goodbye to his parents, went out, and took a taxi directly to school. Carrying heavy luggage and walking up to the 6th floor, Wang Ling didn't blush or breath, and didn't feel tired at all. He opened the dormitory door and put down his luggage. Wang Ling quickly packed the bed and lay down happily. Although the home is warm, when it comes to freedom, it has to be in the dormitory. Wang Ling is now in the second semester of his sophomore year, and today is also the first day of school. And Wang Ling never expected that a very special person would come to the school today. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 437. Wang Ling was the first to arrive in the quadruple room in the dormitory, lying on the bed, very leisurely. After resting for a while, Wang Ling suddenly thought of something, sat up suddenly, snapped his fingers, and called, "Xiao He, come out." Woof woof. As he finished speaking, a dark space tunnel suddenly appeared next to his bed. Accompanied by two dog barks, Xiao He also jumped out of it. Wang Ling's mother didn't like dogs at home before, and she let Xiao He out. When school started, her parents would definitely not let Xiao He come to school with her. Due to these considerations, during the time at home, except for tracking the thieves, Xiao He had been living in the transfer station of the different dimensional system. Although Wang Ling has transformed it into an environment that is very suitable for Xiao He's life, after all, without him as the master to accompany him, there is only an unreliable artificial intelligence brain, which is somewhat unfair to this guy. Now that he has returned to school, his roommates and even people in other dormitories are aware of Xiao He's existence. There is no need to worry about letting him out, as long as no one can see the process. Sure enough, When he appeared in the real world again, Xiaohe looked very excited, jumping up and down, chasing his tail several times, and then jumped on Wang Ling's body, licking Wang Ling's face one after another. Happily Wang Ling chuckled. There's actually someone earlier than me? Damn it, Wang Ling, kid. While Wang Ling and Xiaohe were playing around, suddenly, roommate Wei Bowen also rushed to the dormitory. After seeing the scene in the dormitory, he didn't know what was wrong, and he blurted out, "Human dog, is the love over yet? Roll." Woof woof. Wang Ling was so angry that Xiaohe barked at him, which frightened Wei Bowen to the point where he fainted instantly. "Brother He, I was wrong." Xiaohe then gave up, and Wang Ling became even more happy. "Are you the funny boy sent by the monkey?" "Ah. You mean Shenke? He's at the back, he'll be there soon." Wei Bowen looked innocent, rubbed his nose, and burned Zhang Shenke's body. He felt at ease and took his time. "I packed my luggage while humming the song, 'My skate shoes are fashionable and fashionable. Love is like a gust of wind, after it blows it goes away.'" Then, Zhang Shenke's voice came out from the corridor. The two brothers were humming one after another. They were really competing against each other. "Hey! Brother Black, Wu Hansen, am back." As soon as he entered the door, the guy shouted loudly, regardless of who was in the dormitory. Wang Ling was stunned when he heard Xiaohe barking woof woof twice. Wei Bowen was stunned for a while, as if he had been kicked in the butt, and jumped up. "Hey, Wang Ling, come together, this bastard is scolding us." "As if you didn't scold him just now." Wang Ling twitched the corner of his mouth and did not participate in the fight between these two idiots. Returning to the dormitory, Xiaohe, the police dog, and these two roommates came one after another, and the dormitory became more or less lively. The three of them chatted casually in the dormitory, talking to each other about their experiences at home, and it was already 1 o'clock in the afternoon before they knew it. At this time, the long-awaited Dongfang Yuking finally arrived. On the first day back to school, it was rare that he didn't have his partner Sun Tong Tong by his side. The four of them arrived, took Xiaohe with them, and went out to eat something. After returning to the dormitory and resting for a while, they suddenly received news that there was a class meeting tonight, and everyone in the department had to go to the lecture theater in the evening. Since their sophomore year, they have rarely held class meetings, and even evening self-study has been gradually cancelled. After all, the school's classrooms are limited, and they are all reserved for freshmen. The sudden need to hold class meetings makes the four of them somewhat unaccustomed. However, there was nothing surprising about the class meeting on the first day of school. The four of them didn't take it too seriously after receiving the news. After the break, they played games together and left Xiaohe alone in the dormitory during the evening self-study time. Here, the others went to the lecture theater together. On the first day of school, this is when the school is at its most fully staffed. When Wang Ling and four others came to the classroom, nearly 70% of the seats were already occupied. It had been a long time since we had seen them. These people were sitting together and talking to each other, which was somewhat interesting. The feeling of hustle and bustle. The arrival of Wang Ling also made many people in the classroom quiet for a moment. In the first half of the year, although the extraordinary physical ability shown in the physical fitness test and the subsequent shocking of a group of ruffians were suppressed as much as possible, they were still circulated in a small area in the school. These people all knew that Wang Ling the names are a little curious and even a little fearful. But Wang Ling didn't care. He and his roommates calmly arrived at a row of empty seats, waiting for the next class meeting. While chatting and joking, while waiting, the time passed quite quickly. It seemed that not long after, it was time for the class meeting. Director Zhang came to the classroom with several instructors. Looking at the door, there seemed to be a mysterious person. The person was waiting, but did not show up. Quiet, quiet. Director Zhang came on stage, stopped all the students talking, and the class meeting began directly. Class meetings in the usual sense are mostly about trivial matters, or listening to the instructor or director bragging about the history of the school. Today is no exception. After Director Zhang's simple opening remarks, he talked about the history again. Wang Ling had heard this kind of words more than once, and it was a bit boring. After talking and talking, the main scene finally came. Director Zhang smiled confidently and asked, because our school has a long history and is permeated with humanistic spirit, it naturally attracted many teachers. For example, probably last year, a famous psychology professor from the Normal University once came to our school to teach. I wonder if you still remember this teacher. Huh? Is that the teacher who speaks very humorously? Remember, of course I remember, that one class left a deep impression on me. I remember his name is Professor Li Dong, right? What does it mean to mention him now? As soon as these words came out, there was a thunderous thunder among the student group. Many students, 9 out of 10, still remembered Professor Li Dong, and they were talking about it and seemed to be very interested. And Wang Ling was even more impressed by Professor Li Dong. In the past few days, he had called Professor Li Dong more than once to ask questions of this kind, and Professor Li Dong was patient every time. Enlightenment, the theory of deep hypnosis, is simply like Wang Ling's beacon for traveling in different dimensions. After blinking, Wang Ling looked outside the classroom with some disbelief. No way, it's Professor Li Dong outside. What is there to worry about in this school? Why is he here again? Quiet. While many students were chatting in disorder, Director Zhang interrupted them again, with a proud look on his face, and explained, "That's right. Professor Li Dong, who came to our school last year, was deeply impressed by our school. This semester he was even directly transferred to our school. For this reason, our department also opened a psychology lecture hall, and Professor Li Dong teaches once a week. This is a great opportunity for our school and for you. It will definitely cherish this knowledge and work hard to learn this knowledge. Okay, I won't say anything superfluous. I would like to invite Teacher Li Dong for the next round of applause." Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 438. Wow! This news from Director Zhang Zhuofa was truly earth-shattering. It exploded among the students, causing almost everyone to be shocked. No way, are you really here? This is our school. It should be enough to come here once. Why are you specially transferred here? That's right. There's no academic atmosphere here. Internet cafes, cafeterias, and supermarkets are all busy. Professor, why did you come here? Hush, this is a good thing for us. That's Professor Li Dong. Last time I attended his class, I didn't feel sleepy at all. Yes, me too. Professor Li Dong's class is really good, much better than other teachers' classes. Welcome Teacher Li Dong. Bang 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 bang. In an instant, a violent uproar broke out in the entire lecture hall. After the uproar, the students' initial shock gradually turned into surprise, and they all applauded, making the scene extremely lively. Amidst the applause, Professor Li Dong finally appeared. Similar to how he was dressed the last time they met, Professor Li Dong was wearing old leather shoes, wrinkled casual cotton trousers, and an outdated cotton shirt. The stubble at the corners of his mouth was not cleanly shaved, and his hair was somewhat disheveled, making him look a little untidy. Even their demeanor is almost the same. Their backs are straight, they walk like the wind, they are not wearing glasses, their eyes are bright, their faces are red, and they look confident. I'll tell you, no, is it really Professor Li Dong? After seeing Professor Li Dong with his own eyes, even Dong Fangyuking, who had previously been dismissive of the news, widened his eyes. Wei Bowen also rubbed his eyes vigorously and blinked to confirm that this was indeed Professor Li Dong. Surprise! But Wang Ling frowned slightly and looked at Professor Li Dong, his mind filled with questions. He is still somewhat self-aware. The teaching staff and teaching scale of this school are completely unqualified and unconditional for Professor Li Dong to be tempted and specially transferred here. It felt like a lion lying in a doghouse, a little out of place. But Professor Li Dong really came. What is he here for? While Wang Ling was frowning and thinking, Professor Li Dong had already stepped onto the podium with a smile on his face. He lowered his hands to stop the applause of all the students and said, "Thank you for your enthusiasm. It seems that old man, I am doing well in everyone's minds. I am very happy. In order to repay you, next time if I accidentally bump into you while walking, I will not lie down on the ground." Ha ha ha! A group of students burst into laughter, and even Wang Ling twitched the corners of his mouth. He really couldn't imagine the purpose of Professor Li Dong's visit now, so he simply didn't bother to think about it. At this time, some students were already joking, "Teacher Li Dong, are you here specifically to touch porcelain?" Many students couldn't help but burst out after hearing this question. Even Director Zhang Zhuofu and several instructors looked unhappy, as if they were afraid that Professor Li Dong would be unhappy and suddenly change their minds. However, before they could reprimand them, Professor Li Dong suddenly slapped the table and said with a smile, "That's right, the answer is correct, there is no reward, I'm just here to try." Ha! Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to impress you. You guys are so cute, how can I give it up? I'm just trying to impress the school. Isn't it good to extort more bonuses? Do you think this is the right thing? Ha ha ha. After all, Professor Li Dong was the one who would mediate the atmosphere. Director Zhang's previous speech had made the entire lecture theater lifeless. However, as soon as Li Dong came forward and said a few words, laughter frequently broke out in the classroom. If this was a joke, no one would take it seriously. However, the previous questions were overshadowed by the smoothness. No one in the group of students had any objections. Even Director Zhang and several instructors glanced at each other and secretly admired it. "Okay, no more joking, I will be your psychology lecturer from now on. The school even gave you a special class for me. Although it is only one class a week, it is hard for you. I am very, very happy about the misfortune. Ha ha ha. My classes don't really have many requirements. As long as you come and listen to every class, I guarantee that you will pass the exam. If I say you pass, you will pass. It doesn't matter if you fail." Ha ha ha. Based on the tone of his speech, it is conceivable that his classes will definitely not lack popularity in the future, and may even attract students from other departments to attend classes. In the following time, Professor Li Dong casually chatted with the students present about extracurricular topics, but the time was not very long. After more than 10 minutes, Professor Li Dong said goodbye to the group of students and left the classroom amidst the commotion. Then Director Zhang came on stage and made some boring summaries, then asked the students to study by themselves and finish class on their own when the time came. It was said to be self-study, but in fact almost no students brought textbooks. They were either chatting with each other or playing with their mobile phones. The scene was somewhat funny. Wang Ling was chatting with his roommates when he suddenly received a text message. When he opened his phone, he saw that it was from Professor Li Dong. "Wang Ling, young man, a student I met at school. Not much, you are the only one. How about it, I've come to your school specially, so I'll give you a meal on the first night, isn't that too much?" Huh? Are you having sex with me? Did this touch of porcelain touch me? Wang Ling looked shocked after reading it. What's wrong? Why does his expression look like he's eating shit? Wei Bowen asked while jokingly leaning over his head. Wang Ling glared at him and threw the phone directly over. The three guys scrambled to read the text message. After a while of commotion, they quickly silenced themselves and asked in a lowered voice, Wang Ling, you and Li, what happened between Professor Dong that we don't know about? For example, that aspect. But, there are all kinds of thoughts. Didn't I just get the phone number by chance last time? Did I ask some questions when I encountered it? As for this expression, Wang Ling was speechless. When these funny guys meet together, they always get it. Say something ridiculous. Wang Ling grabbed the phone, edited a text message, agreed to go to the cafeteria after class, and sent it. Then it's time to wait. Normally, evening self-study classes don't end until 9 o'clock, but this rule cannot restrict this group of active students. It has only been more than 20 minutes since Director Zhang and the others left. At 8:30, no teacher came in, and no one knew who was taking the lead. They all rushed out of the lecture theater, each one like a duck on the loose, quacking, quacking, and excited. Wang Ling and the others also mixed in with the crowd and left the teaching building. Although it wasn't the appointed time yet, they were inviting Professor Li Dong after all, so Wang Ling and the others didn't waste time. They went to the cafeteria half an hour early, planning to order some decent dinner and wait for Professor Li Dong. However, Professor Li Dong seemed to know that these students would not abide by the normal time. At this time, he was already waiting in the cafeteria. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 439. The position chosen by Professor Li Dong is not very obvious, but who makes his image so special? Wang Ling and the others walked into the cafeteria and saw many students gathered there. They were all saying hello to the figure. When they walked over, they saw Professor Li Dong. After Professor Li Dong sent away the students who greeted him, Wang Ling asked, "Teacher Li, we don't have evening study until 9 o'clock. It's not even 8:30 yet. Why are you already here?" Professor Li Dong laughed and replied, "I don't know you yet. You are all free and unrestrained. I can't restrict you from studying in the evening. It's just that the director and the others are too enthusiastic and insist on dragging me to dinner. I can just say something." I persuaded them to leave and hurried over. I thought you had all arrived at this time, but I didn't expect you to stay in the classroom for so long. But it's okay, I was just eating and drinking, so I should have waited in advance. You are the right ones. This old professor was approachable when he spoke, without any airs. This simple contact and a few words also eliminated the barriers between them. Although one is a professor and some are just ordinary students, when they are together, it does not make people feel that the difference in status is so obvious. Now that we're all here, let's go order some food. I'm already hungry, so I'll eat with you tonight at this time, Professor Li Dong was joking and urging, acting like a foodie. Wang Ling had an extra-dimensional system and a lot of points reserves. Of course, the invisible rich man didn't care about the meal. He responded with a smile, and then took Professor Li Dong with his 3 roommates. Went to order food. It can also be seen that Professor Li Dong is very popular. During this process, students from Wang Ling and his department can be seen from time to time, and almost every student will take the initiative to say hello to Professor Li Dong. The professor and Wang Ling were also a little surprised when they were together. However, Wang Ling didn't care about this and was still thinking about what to eat tonight. Since he was inviting teacher Li Dong to dinner, Wang Ling also asked the old professor, but the result was a bit ridiculous. The old professor actually wanted to eat boiled instant noodles. Although this is what Wang Ling often eats, it is not suitable for the first time to treat a guest to eat. After much selection, Wang Ling finally chose malatang. At most, he could add more noodles. The school cafeteria, after all, is prepared for students. Naturally, there is no big fish and meat banquet like a restaurant. All the food is simple and cost-effective. Professor Li Dong certainly won't refuse Malatang given his intention to eat instant noodles. However, Wang Ling still felt that it was not good, and then ordered a few more dumplings before he was satisfied. While waiting for the meal, the five of them randomly chose an empty seat to sit down and chatted casually. Professor Li Dong is indeed talkative. No matter what you ask, he can answer it quickly. He is also humorous and very approachable. After gradually becoming familiar with each other, Dongfang Yuking no longer had any scruples and asked the question he was puzzled by. Teacher Li, I'm confused. Our school is, to put it bluntly, a pheasant university. You can go to it if you pay money, and the teachers are the power is almost nothing. The history director Zhang mentioned is all bragging. We all know it. Don't you know? What is it about this school that attracts you that you are especially transferred here? Don't say it is you have to obey orders from above, and they are not that stupid. His words finally got to the point. Even Wang Ling and Zhang Shenke were very curious about this and stared at Professor Li Dong, wanting to hear what he meant. Professor Li Dong's answer was extremely practical. This question is very simple to say. The first is the issue of remuneration. Although I am a professor, there are actually a lot of professors in China, and there are also many at the National Normal University. I'm not the only professor. But this school doesn't have one. Things are rare and valuable. Although my treatment at the Normal University is pretty good, I'm not that outstanding after all, but it's different here. It's like, I am a minister at the Normal University, which is just a higher level, but here I can be the king of the mountain, and the treatment is completely different. I am not a saint, and I have the right to pursue better treatment, don't I? Well, this answer was too real, so real that it left Dongfang Yuking speechless. Then there's the academic research. At the Normal University, the people who can discuss it with me have basically finished all the discussions, and it's hard to come up with any new ideas. The remaining academic research needs to be considered by myself. Over there, my work was very busy and gave me very little time for research, but it was different here. I was also teaching, but I only had one class per week, so I had plenty of time to study and deliberate. It was even better than at the Normal University. I want better treatment. All things considered, isn't it normal for me to come here? Professor Li Dong said the second reason. This reason, which brought out all academic research, was in line with Professor Li Dong's status. After hearing this, Dongfang Yuking slowly accepted these reasons. The dumplings are ready. Spicy hot pot number 6 is ready. Number 7 and number 8 are fine too. At this time, the dinners that Wang Ling and the others ordered in advance were finally brought out one after another. Hearing the shouts of the staff, Wang Ling and the others hurriedly took action. Within a few minutes, all the spicy hot pot and dumplings were brought out. Come over. Looking at the table full of food, Wang Ling still felt that something was missing. He thought for a moment, and suddenly his eyes lit up. Yes, less beer. As the saying goes, dumplings are like wine, and the more you drink, the more you get. Shenke, I'll give you 100 yuan and buy some beer. As he spoke, Wang Ling took out $100 bill. But Zhang Shenke looked at him with contempt. No, Wang Ling, are you trying to kill me? Although we are not rich people, at least I have worked to earn money, and I still have money for beer. If you treat me to dinner tonight, I will give you this beer just please. After saying that, Zhang Sheng set off directly, resolutely. Wang Ling urged, Bowen, please help move it too. Okay. Wei Bowen responded. After the two left, Wang Ling looked at Dongfang Yuking again. Yuking, where is your son Tong Tong? I'm calling you here and there. She is probably with her roommate. I'll call her. Dongfang Yuking took out her mobile phone as she spoke. But Wang Ling said, you have to pick her up in person. Doesn't it look affectionate? That's the same thing. Then you stay with Teacher Li first, and I'll come as soon as I can." After saying that, Dongfang Yuking also set off in a hurry. Now, only Professor Wang Ling and Li Dong are left on this table. At this time, Professor Li Dong looked at Wang Ling meaningfully and asked, "Wang Ling, you sent them away on purpose. Do you have any questions to ask me alone?" After all, he was a psychology student, and Wang Ling's little thoughts were immediately revealed to him. Wang Ling did not deny it. He nodded and asked, "Teacher Li, the reasons you mentioned before are fine to deceive them, but I don't believe them. I want to know the real reasons. In my intuition, the reason must be related to me, right?" Different Dimension Red Alert World. Author, Sanqian Lang. Chapter 440. Oh. Aren't my reasons sufficient? Professor Li Dong showed a curious expression and asked with a smile, "It seems that those reasons can definitely make me come here, right? Also, how can you be sure that is it because of you? If you don't tell me a reason, I will laugh at you." However, Wang Ling didn't smile at all and even frowned slightly. "I don't know why. I said it was intuition. Do you believe it?" Ha ha ha. After Wang Ling finished speaking, Professor Li Dong burst out laughing, which made Wang Ling confused. "Teacher Li, what are you laughing at? Is it so funny?" "No, I was laughing at you for acting too much like me." Professor Li Dong said this inexplicably. Wang Ling's heart suddenly pounded, but he tried his best to pretend to be confused. "Why do you say that?" At this point, Professor Li Dong finally stopped beating around the bush, restrained his playful appearance, and asked slightly seriously, "Young man, to be honest, have you really been exposed to deep hypnosis?" "Shen, what are you talking about? How can I come into contact with deep hypnosis?" Wang Ling's brows jumped when he heard it, and he tried his best to hide it after he calmed down. Wang Ling actually came into contact with Professor Li Dong's so-called deep hypnosis. Although the different dimensional system is not exactly the same as this deep hypnosis theory, the general principle is the same. From this aspect, Wang Ling was not only exposed to deep hypnosis, but also at a deep level and used it almost every day for a long time. However, this is Wang Ling's biggest secret and cannot be exposed at all, not even to the people closest to him. As he used the extra-dimensional system for a longer period of time, Wang Ling became more and more aware of the horror and great temptation of this system. Once it was really revealed, he would face unprecedented troubles, and it might even be a disaster. Under such consequences, even the closest people cannot guarantee that they can absolutely keep this secret, and they may even be seduced by their innermost desires, which will cause serious disaster. Even Wang Ling was almost brought out of those desires at first, but in the end he contacted Professor Li Dong and finally kept his heart and became an ordinary person. However, even if it was Professor Li Dong, Wang Ling was not sure if it was him who would arouse the desire deep in his heart and cause trouble for him. Therefore, now even if Professor Li Dong asks, he must pretend not to know. However, Professor Li Dong kept his words secretive and said, "I remember that when I came to this school last time, I explained the theory of deep hypnosis. This is a powerful force that directly acts on the depths of the brain. Hypnosis can even make the brain mistakenly believe that it is real. If you are injured in hypnosis, you will be injured in reality. If you die in hypnosis, you will die in reality. Similarly, if you become stronger in hypnosis, you will also become stronger in reality." Yes, I did say that because I was very curious about the theory of deep hypnosis. I asked you questions and even called you. But based on this, you said that I was exposed to deep hypnosis? Teacher Li, you think too highly of me, don't you? Wang Ling was still pretending, refusing to admit it. Although he feels overwhelmed because of what Professor Li Dong said, Wang Ling has experienced many wars, big and small, in the world of Red Alert. He has even reached the rank of senior colonel, and is only one step away from becoming a senior colonel. He has become a general and is able to get in touch with PoortoRich. His character is far from being as simple as a college student on the surface. When saying these words, Wang Ling pretended to be too similar and looked very aggrieved. However, this time he was not facing an ordinary person, but a psychology professor. How could he be so easy to deceive? After Wang Ling finished speaking, Professor Li Dong looked confident and reminded, "Don't say I wronged you. Last semester, during your retake of the physical fitness test, the explosive power you showed was simply better than the world record too many. With such explosive power, would you be an ordinary person?" Physical fitness test? How do you know about our school? Wang Ling was even more shocked, and even felt a sense of vigilance in his heart. In real life, he is generally quite well behaved. He basically does not show the explosive power and speed he gained in the red alert world in front of others. However, there was only one day when Wang Ling deliberately wanted to embarrass Zheng Long during the make-up physical fitness test, so he released his speed and shocked everyone. Afterwards, the leader of the gangsters behind Zheng Long came to the door. Wang Ling released his mental pressure and frightened a group of gangsters. Although the pressure was not spread, many students around him saw it. The changes in the gangsters. These two incidents are also Wang Ling's few high-profile incidents and may expose some information. But this all happened within the school, and they tried their best to block the news afterwards. How could Professor Li Dong know about it? Haha, don't be nervous. Wang Ling had tried his best to conceal it, but Professor Li Dong still saw some clues. He stretched out his hand and pressed it with the void. After stabilizing Wang Ling, he said softly, "It's not difficult to know what's going on in this school. Your physical education teacher actually has something to do with me, and I also learned this news from him. When I heard the news at the time, it was a bit unbelievable to me. I even looked up your information specifically. I was still weak for a year and couldn't even pass the physical fitness test, but when I took the makeup exam, I burst out with a speed that far exceeded the world record. This kind of comparison itself reveals something abnormal, and you just called me to ask about it. When I put some weird questions about deep hypnosis together, I guessed the possibility." When describing these things, Professor Li Dong became more and more excited. The theory of deep hypnosis is not a strange theory in the world, but Professor Li Dong seems to be very fascinated by this theory. Now we meet a student who is very likely to be exposed to deep hypnosis. With his persistence in deep hypnosis, how can we not be excited? Even for this purpose, he was able to use his connections to transfer to the school and further contact Wang Ling to verify this conclusion. Wang Ling's mind was a little confused. He just frowned and didn't explain much for a while. But Professor Li Dong is still talking. "Young man, I'm not telling you, you are still too young and a bit competitive. After being exposed to deep hypnosis, won't the development of Angzhen's mind be bad? What's the point of this kind of battle of wills? Showing such explosive power in front of so many people, and easily breaking the world record. Do you know that your physical education teacher even wants to secretly contact the International World Records Organization and report your results?